What would happen if you found out that the only real fight you have in this lifetime is with yourself? Let's talk about that.
Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. With today's guest, we're discussing what it means to be spiritually brave. We all fight the gap between where we are and where we're meant to be. We struggle to merge our spiritual calling with our day-to-day chaos. My guest today doesn't just talk about faith, she brings us into the actual conversation. Kristen Wambach is an ordained pastor, a coach, and a host of the Interviewing Jesus podcast, which I was on as a guest, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. She has mastered the art of letting go of the struggle to find God and simply hear him. If you are ready to stop fighting for your faith and start living from it, this episode is your key. Please welcome Kristen Wambach.
Hello.
So wonderful to have you on, Kristen.
Thank you so much.
Happy to see you once again. Well, we had a spectacular conversation, and I don't know, was it a couple of months ago? I guess it was maybe so. 3 months ago.
Maybe 3 months.
Yeah,
I think it's before summer, before your vacation.
Oh, I guess it was then. Time flies. Well, you mentioned in here the day-to-day chaos, which can certainly be a part of our experience or our experience as we go. But I think that my life of chaos has calmed way, way, way down. My younger years were fraught with chaos. And nowadays I just try to enjoy every single day to the extent that I can. And I know you embody that and live that as well. And we talked a little bit before we hit the record button, but I'm a believer, I guess, that faith and being spiritually brave, as the intro discussed, are things that we can build and sort of foster through our experiences in this life. And if we're paying attention and if we're open to that spiritual bravery and faith. But what brings you, Kristen, to a life of faith? Did you start out that way? Did it grow over time? How did your life sort of roll out from that perspective? And what brings you here today?
What brings me here today? Well, maybe a good place to start was when I was 50 years old. I'm 66 now. And so I'd been traveling in faith with God and building a relationship for a period of time. And I asked him, because when I was 8 years old, and I was sitting in the pew, left-hand side, row 7 with my family, the heritage of evangelical church was handed to me. That's what I knew. John 3:16. That's what I knew. And I asked God, so what really happened that day when I was 8 years old? And I asked you, as they would put it in terms, you come into my heart. And he showed me. And it was interesting because nobody else, so he developed and opened up my spiritual eyes about 25, 30 years ago, which changed everything. So he allows me to see what happens when Jesus actually walks in to our places of faith. How many people are really going to perceive him and let that experience build their faith muscle?
I like the idea of a faith muscle. And I was going to say that when we talked earlier, as we were talking about building faith over time. But so what kinds of things help to build that faith muscle? What is the workout regimen for a faith muscle?
workout regimen. Regimen. Ah. I gotta laugh at that one. So for
when you said
me,
faith muscle, I had to
faith
say
muscle. There
workout.
you go. Faith muscle. So if it's a muscle, it's got to perform. It's got to do something. You know, if you practice, you're going to run a 5K. You have to build up the muscles and your wind to be able to accomplish it respectably. If you don't build up those muscles and your breathing, then it won't feel very respectable and you will struggle. So that's the same thing with a faith muscle. If I had to learn how to apply time. Now, journaling, because I know you're a journaler too, and you write things down. Journaling is what taught me how to hear God's voice. I write every snippet down, whether it's ever expressed or opened. I don't know, but I write it down because that feels like a place of honor. Like with you, I'll write things down because I honor what you said and I want to give it a place for it to be highlighted, developed. So the same thing with your faith muscle. When you write down your impressions, your intuition, your feelings, where you're going, what you're doing, then that honors that faith muscle, and the muscle's got to go, hununk. Oh, okay. It starts to get used to functioning, moving in and out, and supporting where it is that you see faith is going to lead you on that journey.
Interesting. I for a long time in my life, I have felt as though I am being led, which is a pretty cool feeling. And I do know for sure that when I grab the wheel back and I'm hanging on, I'm like, oh man, here we go, you know, bumpy roads and all sorts of crazy stuff. And when I'm hanging on like that, my faith is set aside briefly because I'm trying to drive the bus as opposed to allowing myself to be led. And it sounds like that's what you are saying when it comes to that intuition and that just sort of allowing it to come through us into, you know, whatever world we're experiencing at that given time. Is that accurate?
Let me jump off of your metaphor of the bus and that faith muscle. So throughout our journey as we're walking, I found that I had to spend time in every portion of the bus. I had to be a passenger all the way in the back because that's the cool seats. I had to be passenger, sitting shotgun because I was watching the driver, having a relationship with the driver. I had to be the person that had to go out and open up the hood and check the fluids and kick the tires and make sure that the bus was going to make it from point A to point B. I also had to be the person of figuring out, well, who do I want to let on the bus and who needs to get off the bus? So that develops the faith muscle. And then at different portions in my life, I find that Jesus allows me to do the driving because I've been well taught. Or when you get to drive, then you're more responsible for all those passengers behind you. You're looking out at where you're going, so it builds that muscle that now is all of a sudden looking out for the atmosphere and those people that you have the privilege to have influence over and with. Then that faith muscle starts changing the community in which that you live with.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, you know, my story goes back into addiction and all those sorts of things. And one of the things that I had to do was jettison things from my life that didn't need to be on the bus anymore. And that included humans, that included belief systems, that included, just things that didn't really work for me anymore. And that was a beautifully interesting, but also at times painful process, because we sort of, we have our sphere of influence, we have our people, we have our, cozy little beliefs. Whether or not they're working is one thing, but if they're comfortable and they're recognizable and then we've had them for a while, it's like, what's on the other side? Is there something scary that I'm stepping into? But I agree with you 100%. The bus encapsulates everything of my life. And so how am I going to do it? In terms of deciding. The really cool thing is we get choices, right? We get to choose which direction we go. We come to many crossroads in our lives, and am I going to go this way or am I going to go this way? And it's a beautiful process to as opposed to me grabbing the wheel going like this or like that, I can intuit my way through which way to go. And that, I believe, is faith acquired over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would assume that your audience, one of the big things for me is getting on the bus. Getting on the bus. Okay, let's get on the bus. And sometimes you get on the bus and you get back off and you stand there and let it go by and you go, oh, geez. But that commitment to get on the bus and to allow your mindsets, your life choices, to allow them to be vulnerable, to set them on the desk and say, okay, I'm going to allow change to come in. And then I'm going to have a conversation with change and see what needs to be kicked out, what needs to be added, what needs to be looked at. Yeah. But getting on the bus, that is a huge decision.
Gigantic decision, and probably the biggest decision or decisions we'll make, because like you said, sometimes we step off the bus and watch it go by a few times. But which brings to mind for me, and this was, I guess I've come to these places in my life over time where I just say, like, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it myself anymore. And the first one of those, I haven't had one of those in a long time, but when I was first having those sort of like, thoughts, life is just too tough. What's going to happen next? This is difficult. That led to an ability, I don't know if you'd call it an ability, decision to surrender. And I feel like that is absolutely the key to deciding whether or not I'm going to get on the bus. I don't know if a lot of people get on the bus just because it's going by. I think a lot of people have to get on the bus because they're in so much pain, they don't know where else to turn. And the bus comes along and they're like, okay, I'm in. I surrendered. I give up. I can't do it myself anymore. Do you find that to be true with folks that you've worked with over the years?
How about working with Kristen? I think the catalyst of that surrender decision, I'm a mom of 4 sons, adult sons. I've been married 42 years.
Very cool.
It is. But I remember, let me see, 2 sons were already on the ground. I'm a farm girl, so And I was about 29, 30, and that's the point when you're a parent that you start evaluating who you are. And when you're giving out as a parent, all of a sudden you realize your depository is rather empty. And that was the point that I decided that I didn't like me. I didn't like the way I was responding to my husband, to our marriage, and I felt so vulnerable. That's when I got on the bus, and it was no longer the faith of my parents any longer. It was, okay, God, we have a discussion here. I have some definite questions that I'm going to ask you, and I believe you're going to teach me how to hear them. So that was my point break of get on the bus.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, that's what it takes. And that's what it took for me. It was, to put it bluntly, it was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mm-hmm.
And then it seemed to me, as I decided to start doing different things with my life and with my time and with my choices, I was in a place where some faith was able to grow, because I started to see that when I was on the bus, even if I was just kind of hanging off of a window at some point, I was still sort of attached to the bus. But because I don't think, all of a sudden we go from whatever, and I had this box of stuff that I was handed, just like you were, it sounds like. Here's what you have to believe, and if you don't believe it, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. And that never felt right to me. It felt like, well, why would I be in trouble if I have this God that only wants good things for me? Why would on the other end be some sort of a scary, like, oh man, like, oof. I don't feel like God plucks me out and says, okay, this one's going away for good. I have a hard time with that, because I believe everyone is worthy, and whether they've chosen to live that or not is on them, but that's them. That's not God, condemning them, in my mind. That's how I perceive it. But so to me, it has to do with, I wrote this, we talked about writing. I put things in my phone all the time. I went to bed last night and I'm in bed and I'm like, oh, I just don't feel like getting up. But I had a note that I wanted to write to myself regarding something. Let me see if I can find it real quick, because I thought it was pretty good. But it was a note that I thought was very, and it's exactly what we're talking about. Looking at life as though I'm walking along a beach. And, when you're walking along a beach, you can find cool stones and beach glass and all sorts of, just neat stuff, old bottles or old bottle shards or whatever it is, just really cool stuff, shells, wampum, all that sort of stuff. And I can really relate to that, because that's one of the things that my wife and I used to love to do when we lived on Cape Cod. And I feel like life is the same way. And some stuff I will choose not to pick up, and other things I will, I'll grab it and I'll dust it off, and I'll be like, get the sand off, and I'll just throw it down. Some things will be like, oh man, that's the coolest piece of beach glass I've ever seen. And I'll put it in my pocket, and it becomes a part of my world. And I feel like that's how life goes. We're traveling the road, and we choose what we can pick up. We choose what we put in our pocket. We choose what we dust off and maybe, put back in the sand for someone else, whatever it is. And I to me, that's the coolest part. And that's what helps me grow in life, but also in faith, because I get a little smarter as I get older in terms of what I'm going to pick up and put in my pocket and what I'm going to discard. Yeah?
Yeah. It's called grace. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful process, and that's really what I look at it as, because if I were to come on to this planet and not be able to grow and progress and change, if I was just here and I showed up and I'm a stick man and that's all I get to do is walk around like a stick man, I can't think, I can't change, I can't make choices, I can't make decisions, I can't, all of those sorts of things. And that's the grace part, I think, that allows us to choose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you were sharing your story, I happen to agree with you about that box, because I remember you telling me about that box of stuff that we're handed generationally, that, okay, this is all the keys, all the tools, this is how it works, there you go. And I agree with you that in my box as well, who God was portrayed as is not true. He doesn't sit up there with the thumb and go like this. He does give us choices. He gives us choice whether to believe in him, whether to talk to him, whether any of that. We're free to have that choice. But the cool thing that I have experienced in the building is how good he is, that he provided himself for us before we made any choices. And that's what I had to experience and learn and hear to know him, what a good father he is with all of his kids. That we can't choose our way out of his presence. We just can't. We can't go to the farthest part of the world. That's not out of his reach. We can't go into the highest place of meditation. Well, hello. You're still within the body and your consciousness here, but your spirit is higher than your consciousness. So it has been a very interesting journey. Not one that is with all the joys. There are trials and pain, especially when you're trying to shake out the truth, like the sand, you got your sand dollar and you're going to dust it off and go, this is a living being that actually was in the ocean, that lived it. But now it's in my hand. But we dust it off. It's up to us to first choose. We're going to pick it up. Is it valuable that day? And if we find it's valuable that day, are we going to learn the life in which that sand dollar experienced before it ended up in our hand? It's when we all of a sudden look at it and we go, I wonder why this sand dollar is so interesting today. It's in my hand. It feels like a gift. Well, we have the choice of asking ourselves that. And as soon as we open up our faith muscle, that lovely faith muscle, then it's like the universe that God contains can speak.
It is an opening. There is no doubt. When you were speaking, I was reminded of, and I was probably 21 years old, so it was a couple of years ago, but I'm driving
Just
in just a couple. I was driving north on Interstate 23 in, I think I was probably Whitmore Lake, Michigan. And I looked up on a hill and there was a church, and a lot of them have sayings on the signs and that sort of thing. And I was struggling with my belief, my faith, my choices, a whole bunch of stuff at that point in my life. But I was trying. And I feel like that's the prerequisite for changing, is you have to try. And you have to try to work that muscle. But on that sign, it said, and it speaks, I think, to exactly what you were just saying, Kristen, God is with you whether you like it or not. And that was pretty cool because I needed to see that at that time. And I 100% believe that to be true. Whether I'm looking or noticing or understanding or experiencing at that given moment, you're right. There is a place where it just is. It just is. And I know that place, and I spend a pretty fair amount of time in that place now. And that, that muscle has grown over time where I'm able to, and grateful for. I don't look at any of this stuff that we're talking about. I'm trying and I'm doing my stuff. I do my life in a way that I feel is the next right thing. I truly, truly do. And I think that's important, but I don't take responsibility for all the beautiful things I have in my life. I just say thank you, because gratitude to me is a channel to keep that connection strong.
To distill down your story, did that 21-year-old man who saw that saying on the sign, did he have any idea that you were going to be sitting on a podcast today and sharing that exact story?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And that's the God that I want. I need to know him. I need to know this person, God.
Yeah. And there are so many stories that are just, my whole life is well beyond my understanding. Well beyond my understanding. I don't have a clue. And I'm grateful that, there's a God who does have a clue, because all of those beautiful stories like that, and I haven't thought of that story in probably years until you were speaking. And then, that's, I think, how God allows us to give our message away and to potentially help others with our experiences and our the strengths that we've gathered over time and those kind of things. Because I'm not the one that puts that there. I'm not the one that puts me into that experience, and I'm also not the one who remembers it. Like, I'm getting fed. That's how I feel. I'm getting fed wonderful things. And maybe we can shift gears a little bit, because I think there are the things that are like, oh, that's wonderful. And then there are things like, oh man, that sucks. But they're designed for the same thing. They're designed to help us move forward. I think, and develop that muscle. And a lot of times it's the difficult things, or I should say most of the time it's the difficult things that gives us the opportunity to develop that muscle.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Years and years ago, my grandma gave me one little piece of wisdom amongst many, and she said, never pray for patience. Because if you pray for it, God says, do you really want this? So I never prayed for patience. And that patience, first patience with self, patience with immediate family. Here's that little faith muscle there. And it's kind of like, it's in there. There's patience in there. So we think a muscle, like you said, those snippets that come out. So that story, that faith muscle had that story in there about that sign on the church. That faith muscle had the story about picking up the treasures that you find on the beach. And I love the glass on the ocean, the sea glass. And you think about it, where it came from, its purpose, and that it rolled around there. And I love to think of its journey before it ended up in my hand. And I like to think those things, where they came from.
I do too. And now that you bring that up, and it's the same with like the wampum shells, because they started off probably getting broken down, and they were sharp, and they broke, and they're sharp, and they're capable of cutting you if you pick them up 100 years earlier, or 50 years earlier, or 20 years earlier, or whatever it was. But then they're tumbling around in the sand, right? And they're smoothing, and they're tumbling around in the little stones, and they're smoothing. And by the time we get a chance to experience that, whatever it is, the glass or shells or anything, it's generally they're smooth, and they don't have those sharp edges. And I can only wish the same for myself, in terms of, because I used to have some sharp edges, and there are times, when I can still have sharp edges, but I've been tumbling around in the sand, and I've been tumbling around in the stones and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of those edges that could previously cut, and not necessarily others, but also myself, have smoothed over time. And it's another thing that I'm grateful for, because when I wake up, I want the best for other people. I want other people to have a wonderful, sort of robust life that they love. And if I can help them to do that, that's why I'm here. I don't have to worry about Daryl all the time. I really don't. Daryl's life is fine. Who can I help? And I think that's an important, a very important piece of continuing this journey.
And my part in that journey is, if we were to use the ocean as a metaphor for God, my part in the journey is, first, for me, learning the ways of the ocean, the movement of the ocean, the gravitational pulls of the ocean, learning the ways of the ocean, so that I can share and help people who are doing the rolling, watching those little edges get softened. Now, I do not know what a wampum is. A wampum, is it a shell? Is it a...
It's a shell, and it gets very smooth, and I think it's a clam shell, but it turns purple. It turns purple, and it used to be, and I don't know this for a fact, but my understanding is that it used to be used as currency with American Indian cultures, that sort of thing.
Okay.
They're beautiful.
How big are they? I'm going to have to look that up. Google
They
it.
could be like that big or that big, or probably at the most this big. But they get so worn down over time, and I think the salt water changes the color to purple. But some of them are just. You'll find jewelry with them. It's all up and down the East Coast, but definitely the Northeast. There's a lot of wampum floating around the shores.
Cool. Thank you for explaining that to me. I go, all right, that's a word. I've heard the word, but I hadn't heard it resulted in things that come out of the ocean. So.
Yeah, this makes me think of, because I'm a big believer in things change over time, and I understand that, and definitions change, and the way people portray things change. There's a lot of, the 10,000 buzzwords that we have now, we might have had 100 back when I was starting to come up in this different way of life. And one of the things that people talk about nowadays is self-love. You have to love yourself. You just, that's the key. If you love yourself, everything's great. I agree with that, but I also think that, because there's so many temptations around us to become addicted to alcohol or drugs or social media or gambling or whatever it is. There's just a myriad of things that can keep us from loving ourselves. So what came to me the other day that I put in my phone, I just saw as I sneaked that peek a couple minutes ago to look at the other thing, was that how can we love ourselves if we're doing things that would illustrate that we may not even like ourselves, in terms of, some of the addictions and some of the things that keep us stuck. And that's a big question, I think, for getting to the sort of the foundation of what it takes to move ourselves to build that faith. And like we talked about earlier on the bus, some things you got to just throw off the bus. You can't have them on the bus with you if, we're going to move forward. And anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts of that, Kristen, because I just, it's crucial to me that people understand that, so they can get to that self-love.
I've had the privilege 30 plus years to encounter, teach, be changed and moved by several different modalities of inner healing. Inner healing just keeps changing as well. So when I've applied it to myself, gone through the session or the course or whatever it is, and then become a student to a teacher of that modality, the one overarching thing that I've noticed, and this has to do with our self-love, is that everybody who comes in, including myself, comes in for, okay, sit down with God. This is what we think. This is our list. Okay, God, you're going to work on this and you're going to this. And I went, oh, he's probably going to point out this and he's going to talk about this. He has never done that. Ever. Never, ever has he sat there and pointed out what I consider all my faults and my weaknesses and my areas where I messed up. Ever. He just wants to sit on the beach with us and we, and hang out with us and say, pick up that wampum, thing, look at it, and maybe tell a story like yours. That's all he wants to do. And when we realize to have that conversation with him, then we realize oh my gosh, he's really not concerned about all this stuff. Like I thought he'd be concerned about all this stuff. And he wants to just hang out with me and talk with me and have a conversation with me. Then that is where my self-love begins. Because I'm sitting with somebody who models it. He models that love. And all of a sudden I realize, well, if he doesn't want to talk about that I, flipped out on my husband 2 days ago and I haven't asked for forgiveness. No. Through a relationship, he'll come in and say, how's that working for you?
Right.
Yeah. But that's where self-love learns to exist, by hanging out with love himself.
Yeah, I like that. And I guess because there's a component of that where we need to potentially do some work. And like you said, some of the modalities and some of the things you've been exposed to. I went to an interesting thing this last weekend, which was it was called Deep Waters Recovery. And it was a really cool weekend, very powerful, very, very it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. And a friend of mine asked me to go, and he founded it and runs it and that sort of thing. But we're never in a position, I don't think, where we can't, number one, we can benefit from those kinds of things. And the biggest benefit I got was, I think, and it'll continue to sort of unfold as time goes on, but experiencing other people healing was just the coolest thing. Other people sort of, like coming to realizations and talking about things and we call it coughing up the hairballs. You got to get rid of some of that stuff. And I think that's crucially important, but we're never too far where it doesn't benefit us or someone else for us to do those kinds of things and have those kind of experiences. And I believe if God's sitting there with me on the beach and he is that love and he's, expressing that to me without judgment, without like, hey dude, you screwed this up. I do all that to myself.
Yeah.
I do all that to me. And he's just sitting over there like, all right, well, I'm here,
Mm-hmm.
when you put down the butt kicking machine that you have turned on right now for yourself, I'm here. And so working through those things, I think, is crucially important. And also understanding that love is there and it's available at any time. But there are things that I need to work through. And that process can be just sublime and beautiful. And I've experienced a lot of that. And that's why I want it for as many people who are willing to pick it up and try.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The trying part. I'm a doer as well. I'm a doer as well. Then I ask you a question.
Of course.
So on this season of us riding or driving the bus, wherever we are on this bus or walking along the ocean, we have lots of really good metaphors we're working with here.
We do.
What is our response for people around us that are not in the trying mode?
That's the question of our lifetime. I think, because we're constantly surrounded by other humans. And I have a circle that has gone from a fairly large circle to smaller and smaller and smaller. And not because I'm trying to cut myself off from anyone or the world, although there are some people, I shouldn't say that. There are some people I do want to cut myself off from because they're not ready to try. And my message generally is, look, I'm here when you're ready. I'd love to help. I'd love to have you ask me questions or bounce things off me, or hear my story if it can help you, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, those people, if I've had enough contact with them, and I've got family members who are in that, that place. I've got friends, new and old, who are in that place. And hey, I have to spend my time here. This is where I spend my life, and I spend it inside, and I spend it, I do all the outside stuff. I do business, I do podcasts, I write books, all that stuff. But it's all designed around spending the time in here and spending my, Joseph Campbell said it wonderfully. Eternity has nothing to do with time. And I believe that is just a beautiful way to look at the eternal now that I can continue to have in here. So what do I do with those people? I allow them. I don't necessarily do anything with them unless they're just toxic for me in my life, but I allow them to understand that I'm around, I'm available. If you ever want to try, I'll be here to help. But until that time, I have to spend my time with me and with this.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Kristen?
Mm-hmm. It is an ever-changing lesson that has epiphanies. I think it would come back if I'm sitting on the beach with Jesus and he's teaching me how to love me. So part of that maturing is the ability to love people. Some of them are closer in our inner circle, and some of them are not. And that's part of the process of self-love. That's part of our process of looking at the value that eternity is now. And I agree with you. Time is to govern creation, not us.
I like that. I like that a lot. I heard somebody say a long time ago, time is around to keep everything from happening at once, which is kind of governing creation, right? Allowing things to unfold as time moves. But I do like that distinction. It's not to govern us.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's really cool. I had never thought about it in that way ever. So thank you for bringing that out. So in terms of people in your life, and there are toxic human beings on this planet, and that's just a part of our experience, and it's okay that there are toxic people on this planet, but how do we, and we can love them from a distance, and that's 100%. I agree with that 100%. But in terms of, I heard a long time ago, be kind to everyone, but don't allow yourself to be a doormat. And I think toxic people can, wipe their feet on us as if we're doormats. And I have found that they may continue to do that as long as I allow that to happen. And I don't think that is what a God of my understanding would not want me to be having my, somebody wiping their feet off on me all the time. What do you think about that, Kristen?
I agree. And that is part of the journey of self-loving. In my case, the journey of knowing God. And when you help people, because people have helped you, sometimes God puts you in the place to bring forth transformation in their life. You might be the person that says, I disagree with you, or no, that behavior's not okay. But we have to be strong in us to be able to say that, to actually stand for that, and let our life actually proclaim it, that no, that's not okay. And we might be the person that God, I'll use the word use, but I'm never happy with that word use. Flow through. God flows through that brings a consequence. And when a consequence comes to a person, like you and I have mentioned experience, that's because it's asking the question, do you want to try? And if we don't love ourselves enough and love people around us enough, then we will not ever be in a place to where we come in and bring what's the word that I used? I forgot the word that I used. It was a great word. In that conflict, we might be the person that God says, here's the consequence. What are you going to do with it? And we might be that person that actually continues to hold that consequence in front of them.
100% agree. And maybe that consequence for them is us saying, I can't do it anymore. And maybe that's what strikes them from the perspective of shaking them loose a little bit from that stuck place.
Mm-hmm.
And puts them in a position where they're like wanting to try.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. The cool thing about life, and one of the things that I'm eternally grateful for, is that I don't have to figure out the lessons that I need or the lessons that somebody else needs, or like orchestrate all this stuff. I mean, it's orchestrated for me. It really is, and I believe that, and that's part to me of being led, like we talked about earlier. It's I get the messages, and I get the lessons, and I get like, oh, that's right, I forgot about that, or oh, I was just reminded of that, or oh, that makes sense, or ooh, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. And I get those lessons, and I think the interesting thing is, if I don't heed the lesson and change something, I'll get it again in some form, and then I'll get it again. I can get it 17 times, and I'm sure I've had them where I've gotten them 17 times, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand, what I need to change, or there's a shift, or I don't do that anymore, or I choose to not go down that road anymore, whatever it is. And that's, to me, is, people sometimes ask for, evidence. Well, there's a lot of evidence around of God, of something greater than me or us, or, whatever somebody wants to call it. I don't care. I don't get hung up on those kind of things. But But I know I can't orchestrate all of these things for all of these humans. And then when I'm done learning that particular lesson, even if it's 17 times, it won't happen again. It won't be presented to me anymore. I couldn't figure that out myself. Something's orchestrating it. Anyway, I could talk about that for days because that's just so fascinating to me.
Yeah. But let me share just a perspective.
Sure.
Having that conversation with God or our intuition or our ahas, it feels really good when it doesn't take 17 times for it to get. So there's the growth.
Right.
It doesn't take 17 times for Holy Spirit to go bang. When are you going to get this,
Right.
Because that faith muscle has been so well moved. It's strong. That faith muscle is so strong and in such good shape that you can just get a wind of, ooh, oh, I did have some attitude on the backside of that comment, didn't I? So, and that's what sitting on the beach with him for a journey produces, that you can just feel the wind, that you're out of sync, that you're out of tune. And that's a beauty. It's not taken me 17 times. It's now down to a wind of the clarity of the faith in my heart.
100% agree. And when I was saying 17 times, and a lot of times I feel like I'm talking to people younger than me. I do, because a lot of people are younger than me these days. And but that's how I look at it. Like, because when I was in my teens or 20s, it was 17 times.
Yeah.
And now it's not. Now it's I like to call it a resonance. There's just something that resonates when either it's right or it's not right, and it's immediate, and I know, and that's a very cool thing. But we have to build that muscle because of the 8 times or the 17 times or the 4 times or the whatever, and then you get to a point where it's like, okay, now I know which way to go, which is a really cool thing, because sometimes we don't even have to ask the question. The question doesn't even have to come up. You just know, and that's a beautiful thing to experience. We've been talking for almost an hour, my friend.
Yeah,
I know. So we got to shift gears a little bit, and let's talk about your work and your podcast, your book. You do a million different things, maybe not a million, but a lot. So let's talk about that and where we can find you.
Well, you can find me at KristenWambach.com, and there will be the podcasting and those kind of things, the coaching. And then I am an entrepreneur like you are as well. And I have a couple of businesses and one in particular called Rabbit Trail Supply, where it's a beautiful restoration journey. And I know I just go, we're into it. So I'll put it in a nutshell. So years ago, my husband and I, we had an auto repair business, and it did really well for 5 years. And then it just blew apart. I'm not the same person that I was then. So we lost everything. We lost our home. We lost the business. We moved to where we are today with our tails between our legs. So I have always known that God was going to restore the business. And he's doing that. And so we've been rabbit trail supply has been, what, 4 years? 4 years. And it's so cool because my husband has these brilliant ideas. They're so simple, and I go, well, that really helps us. If it helps us, it'll help others. And then my entrepreneur person comes out and I go, I can sell that and I can do all that. So it's wonderful to see God restoring things into your life as a couple, as a family, as an individual. And I only know that about him from spending time on the beach next to him, that he's restoring. And I love what you said, how you just get an idea, it comes in, and before it finishes processing through your head, it just comes out and there's the answer. And I attribute it to it as like, I'm just about ready to ask God a question and I don't even have to put it into words and the answer comes back. That's that connection and that conduit that we have with our spirit, with him. And it is a beautiful thing. And that's what I hear that both you and I desire to share with people, just to get to that conduit where the flow is, you can feel the flow. And that feeling the flow is what makes us so grateful that we opened ourselves up to learn how to try, learn how to do it again, learn how to make it from 17 to 4 times. So that's what makes us grateful, because we can feel that ever so precious flow. And we don't have to make up being grateful or gratitude, because that's where the stories in our faith, our heart, that's where the stories just go, Holy Spirit goes, remember this story? Remember this story? And it just constantly keeps us in that flow of gratitude. And that's where we live in eternity and totally unaware of time.
Beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. And I think making that distinction between, sitting on the beach with God and nothing can stem that flow unless I decide to stem the flow.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing can, and so the try comes for me from taking that responsibility and saying, I'm the only one that can stop that flow. What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's crucial for people to understand, because a lot of times people will wait for something to happen. Like, oh, self-love, come on. I heard somebody said self-love, so bring it, Not how it works. And anyway, so wonderful, Kristen. Do you have is there a final thought? I loved just what you just said there. That was absolutely beautiful. You had me.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it.
That was great.
That was that little muscle there. I have to go back and listen to it when you publish it. Final thought.
Yeah, in regard to any message for anyone who might be struggling or looking for a direction or wanting to change.
Go find the quiet place and take a piece of paper and pen. And just believe, I would say, just believe what God shows you. Just like you woke up, what was in the morning, you wrote on your phone? There was a belief point that you had there that this is a nugget. Oh, this is a nugget for today. You had to believe that was a nugget for you for today. And that's what we never can have enough of. Is just go sit, be quiet with a piece of paper and pencil. And if a butterfly comes and sits on your shoulder, write it down. Draw a picture of the butterfly. I mean,
absolutely. I that's absolutely crucial. And just the simple fact that what I wrote down this morning that I told myself to remember last night because I was too lazy to write it down. It came to me this morning. I put it down and I talk about it today. I had no idea I was going to talk about it today.
And see, the more times that we do that, we honor the listening. We're honoring it. Honor is so huge. And every time I write it down, God goes, oh, and if it needs to be adjusted, he'll adjust it. If I need, but because I honored it and wrote it down, it means that I have placed myself in the position of being a student of my own life.
100%. Well said, Kristen. On that note, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Enjoyed it very much. And we will be staying in touch.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
Thank you again.
So much, Daryl.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed When I Stop Fighting the podcast, please check out my books and my journals on my website, daryldittmer.com. Enjoy a 15% discount by using the code PODCAST, DARYLDITTMER.com. Thanks again.